Our moderator is Assistant Professor of Management, Mateo Cruz, who holds a PhD in Social Organizational Psychology and a Master's in Organizational Psychology from Columbia University. His main research focuses around diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, change in groups and organizations. As a scholarly practitioner, he is guided by one central goal to research: design and deliver evidence-based interventions that advance change leadership at the intersection of identities. And with that, I will turn the conversation over to Mateo. Thank you all for being here today.
All right. Oh, there we go. Good afternoon, everyone. That was a mouthful. Thank you, Abby. I don't know who wrote that. Just kidding. It was me. Great having you all here with us today for a celebration of the kickoff, which occurred about September 15th of National Hispanic Heritage Month. I'm very pleased and proud to be here as a professor at Bentley University. I've been here for 7 years. I'm teaching more than 2,000 students, and I am just pleased to be meeting with the panelists today for our event. Before we jump in, I just want to provide a little bit of context for this program. As you all know, because you're joining the call, it's National Hispanic Heritage Month, which starts September 15th and goes to October 15th. And that in and of itself, I think, is interesting because I think of us as a cultural community, whether we identify as Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latine, Latinx, as an intersectional community. And so to me, it's of no coincidence that we actually have an intersectional celebratory month, which spans 2 months in the middle. And part of what we're going to talk about today are our many different ways that we identify under this larger umbrella of Latino, and talk about how our cultural heritage influences us in groups and organizations and in our workplace. Our panelists also are all Bentley alum. So they've been through the university and they have had incredible success in their own careers. So they will also be talking about how that success, Bentley was part of their journey, and also how their cultural heritage continues to inform their success. Before we begin, though, we're going to start with a short clip about the experience of Latino people in the workplace. And this clip is to kind of give us the context for the variety of experiences that we may or may not address here. After the clip plays, then I will introduce our panelists, we'll bring them in, we'll have the questions, and then we want to make plenty of time for the Q&A. So Abby, when you're ready, this is a clip about what the experience is like working at Netflix as a Latinx employee.
About my identity, I lead with my heritage. My mom.
I didn't ever see myself represented. That's what's always driving me, is whose voice isn't heard and who needs to be uplifted. And there's a ton of work to do, but this is the place to do it.
Cheers, cheers. When I talk about my identity, I lead with my heritage. My mom is from Mexico. My dad's from El Salvador. I was born in California. If you had to put like a whole label on it, I'd be Mexican, Salvadoran, American.
According to Pew, I'm only one of 3% people who refer to themselves as Latinx, but as a queer person of color, I think that is the most inclusive term for me, because I also want to make sure that I do say that I'm queer, because like there is that erasure and the machismo in the community.
Our report shows we definitely need to increase Latin representation in our company. I think one of the challenges is there's still biases and perceptions about us.
The work that Netflix has a responsibility to do is to unpack this idea that Latinidad is one big brown homogenous bubble. And like being intentional of, we're entertaining the world, let's tell the stories of the world and have it represent the members, the people that live in these countries.
The thing that's been really helpful for me to feel like I fit in has been our employee resource group, Somos. And they've showed us some numbers that retention for Latinos at Netflix is not as good. Not only is the problem identified and named, but then it's like, so what can we do?
If we don't use our voice and speak up and say the things that aren't said, then you don't have those good, troubled, challenging moments that help people grow and evolve.
Yeah.
You want to make your friend you're working with better. That's all. You want your colleagues to be better, and you want your colleagues to be better to you as well.
I was made to believe that because I have an accent and because I'm a Black Latina, that I could not make it on the general market. But when I came to Netflix, I was shown that it's an asset. It's an asset that you not only identify, you speak the language like fluently, but you also having that experience of being born in another country, having the experience of working with so many communities.
I remember people said, we hired you for your voice.
Yes.
And I was like, you did what?
Yes.
Have you heard it? Because it's loud. Are you ready? But I always sort of give the advice of like, if you're interested in coming to Netflix, it's not perfect. I tell people, I'm not selling you roses and rainbows, but at least it is a place where you can come and enjoy the foundation of our culture and be a little bit more of yourself.
I'm glad that Netflix is doing some things with like high schools, because it does start at that level. Yeah. Like if you're in high school and you're looking for a job, even if you love film, that's gonna seem so far away.
Again, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're giving these opportunities. And last year we created a pipeline program with the Los Angeles Latin International Film Festival to select 5 Afro-Latino filmmakers and give them $25,000 each to produce a short film. They premiered this past June, and one is in the festival circuit in Oscar contention, which is amazing.
I'm actually doing it to pave the way for someone
right.
that I can help.
The Netflix of today isn't the Netflix of tomorrow,
It's true,
right?
because it wasn't the Netflix from 20 years ago.
That's correct.
From 5 years ago when I started.
I would love to see true representation at that like leadership level, even higher in every part of the company, just to see kind of like that panorama.
People are recognizing that we're one of the biggest populations in the entire United States, and we demand attention and representation, and for our voices to be heard.
And we got each other's back.
Yes.
All right, thank you for that. So if you're just joining us now, I saw a few participants pop into the room. This is not an advertisement for Netflix, but this is our opportunity to talk with our Latinx alum about their experiences in the work environment. So I'm going to read some introductions. I believe our third panelist is attempting to get in, so I am going to read his bio, but let's start with Vanessa Suarez. Vanessa Suarez is the class of 2014. She's a French Venezuelan with a professional background in digital marketing and analytics. She earned her bachelor's degree in hospitality management from the Universidad Simón Bolívar and joined the Falcon community, receiving her master's degree in marketing analytics. Based in Boston, Vanessa works as a web strategist on the international marketing team at Hubspot, where she manages the company's 5 international websites. Vanessa, it's so wonderful to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here with everyone.
We also have Alejandro Zelaya. Alejandro, did I get that right?
Fantastic, Mateo.
Okay, thank you. Class of 2016. Alejandro majored in economics and finance. He's a business professional involved in the early stage venture capital fund in Guatemala, Invariantes Fund. He has extensive experience in the fields of sports management and international business administration, and is committed to developing the next generation of sustainable businesses in Central America. He also currently serves as a member of Bentley's Falcon of the Last Decade Board, which is the acronym FOLD. So thank you, Alejandro, for being here and for all the service you do on behalf of Bentley.
Thank you.
We're hoping to be joined soon by Guillermo Fernandes, class of 2013, who majored in economics finance as well. Guillermo was born in Venezuela and worked as a private banker in Miami until recently when he founded Block Pliance. His extensive experience in cryptocurrency and banking led him to build an innovative blockchain compliance and tracing platform for financial institutions. So we're hoping that Guillermo can join us as well. And again, my name is Mateo Cruz, and I am a professor at Bentley. And one thing I want to say about this is that I don't speak Spanish, and many of us Latinos don't, which makes us a very diverse community. So I appreciate being here. So please do correct me on any mispronunciations of names or organizations or former schools. But let's start with that, because we are a complex and nuanced community, and the way that we label ourselves differs. So this is National Hispanic Heritage Month. Some of us label ourselves as Latino, Latina, Latine, Latinx. So what I'd love to open with, Alejandro and Vanessa, is just what's the term that you use to identify yourself under this larger umbrella? And tell us a little bit about what that cultural identity means to you. So Alejandro, why don't we start with you?
Fantastic. Thank you, Mateo. So, to full disclosure, I hate, labeling terms of how to identify myself. To be honest, I grew up and was born and raised in Guatemala. which is, far away from where Vanessa was born, for example. I'm super close to the United States and super close to Mexico. Mexico, they have their pretty own way of, identifying themselves. So I consider myself a Latino. I remember when I was a little kid, even filling out the documentation when entering the US, with my tourist visa, it was like Latino or European or something like that, so I do consider myself a Latino. I think, that's just because of geographically, how close we are to the US. And obviously, being born and raised here in Guatemala, Mateo, obviously it has its challenges, when, graduated from a school in the US, I was part, before joining Bentley, in Jacksonville University, which is, in the north part of Florida. I was playing soccer over there, and imagine, like in that soccer team, we had team members all over the world, but across the university, I think there were, like, not mistaken, like 5,000 students. There were only 2 Latinos, myself and another guy from Guatemala that I had no idea was in Jacksonville. So you can imagine, my surprise, like, all right, Florida, you can imagine, like a bunch of Latinos and so on. But it definitely, shaped my identity. I always felt my roots present. For example, I remember when I was a freshman and sophomore in college, that my mom will send me beans in my backpack, like local beans or local, like snacks from Guatemala all over that I love, that I will share with my friends and so on. So yeah, I'm sure if I can further explain, and down the road in the seminar, I'm sure I'll tell you a bit of stories, when I started working afterwards for the New England Revolution, that, it was actually a career fair at Bentley. Imagine myself selling soccer tickets in the Boston area by phone with my accent and so on. But, I'll tell you how that really had an impact, and that how gave me a big advantage with the rest of the people. So yeah, I'll leave it to Vanessa now, and we can jump on that later.
I love that. What a great introduction. Thank you, Alejandro. And yes, we will pick up on that thread. I can't wait to hear it. Vanessa, tell us a little bit about how you identify under this larger umbrella, and a little bit about your cultural heritage.
Absolutely. So on my end, basically, I identify myself is also pretty new, since I've been in the US for about 10 years plus. And, it's the first thing that you see when you actually arrive to the US. Like, you need to check a box, or what are you, like, what race are you? I'm like, I'm not Caucasian, I'm not white, I'm not black, where am I? So that was like a big cultural, like, shock at the beginning, and understand that I had to identify myself. So I use Latina. Hispanic is okay with me too. I have like pretty much like no issues. But also it's funny because, like, the cultural identity, it's not really fixed. It's more like it evolves with you and then with situation. So my situation was pretty particular because I was born and raised in France. And then I moved, I think when I was 10 years old, I moved to Venezuela with my family. So all my family is from Venezuela. We're just living there, and I grew up there. But I did end up being doing my high school in the French system. So I kind of was living in a French bubble. And I actually identified myself more with the French culture, right? Like I thought I was going to go to France, do my university in France, all of the things. So I didn't start really like identifying myself as Venezuelan up until I started college. When I started college, I was like, oh, this is a whole different culture of my country that I wasn't even like totally aware of. To be honest, I loved it. I now identify myself as a very proud Venezuelan. The proud came later, like during college, when I started being politically active and, just like protesting like in my country. That's the whole story, and a whole other story. But yeah, so right now at the moment, I'm just like, when I introduce myself, I actually say like, oh, I'm Venezuelan. And that's kind of how I introduce myself.
Yeah, that's great. And also what a nuanced story about the identity. So thank you for sharing that, Vanessa. In terms of cultural identity, so both of you came to Bentley from other countries. So I'm curious first just about your experience in school before we transition to your professional life and your experience at work. Let's start, since we have other alum on the call, just about what was it like for you to come to Bentley, given your different backgrounds? How did your identity develop over the years and inform the direction that you went in your career? And we'll just keep it in order for now. Why don't we go to Alejandro and then Vanessa?
That's a really good question, Mateo, and I think it all goes back to, with Bentley and all the, panels that I've been, I've always tell something. And if there are alumni here or students or parents, like my advice to them is like, with Bentley, it's always two ways, right? It's like, it's you guys give the 50% and then we give 50%, like you give us all the tools, all the necessary like environment, advice, whatever, teachers, everything, that we need in order for us to get the most out of the school. So immediately, when I joined Bentley, I remember, like building this small like chess club, with 2 or 3 friends that were, one was Mexican and the other one was Salvadorian. And then, in my courses of entrepreneurship with Professor Tufile, I recall perfectly, Entrepreneurship 101. I partnered up with 2 guys, from Latin America, and we started a startup. And out of curiosity, one of them is one of my investors right now, which is just fantastic, like what, my experience in that school. But on the other hand, Mateo, my very best friend that graduated from Guatemala, same high school as me, he attended Boston College. And he was part of the soccer team at Boston College. So I had a bunch of friends, mostly European, as Vanessa was saying. Vanessa was packed with guys from France, it was incredible. So I had that mix, of like mixing myself up, with a bunch of Europeans, a bunch of Latins inside Bentley, like doing a bunch of activities. But also, I remember perfectly that I loved working with US students, Americans, in group projects and so on, because they were way more disciplined than what we were, like in groups, Bentley, and Vanessa's laughing because she agrees with that, Bentley loves doing group projects, right? Like every class, it's a group project, finance group project and everything. But they were way more disciplined, I'm used to like, being structured, being very disciplined in terms like, right, Mateo, this Friday, the latest, you need to do this, Vanessa, this, and I will do this and that. So, having said that, I guess I live, throughout all the words, but my advice, and if you're alumni, you can still engage in a bunch of activities with Bentley, or if you're a student here in this call, like don't close yourself to your only group, don't close yourself to your 3 or 4 roommates and their, extended friends that it's only like a group of 10 people, like really put that time that you have, that free time that you definitely have throughout school in order to meet a bunch of people. You really never know who you're going to meet at Bentley. The network that I've built at Bentley, Mateo and Vanessa, has allowed me 2 or 3 stories that I can quickly tell. Me visiting countries that I have no idea, and I just reach out to this guy from Bentley, or friend of mine from Bentley, like, hey, we were in, I don't know, Management 101 with Professor Mateo Cruz. Do you remember me in this group? Hey, I'm attending, India. What places do you recommend that I should visit? And I ended up meeting up with them, so that type of stuff is, what I love about Bentley. It's such an open community, such an openness among students. And now imagine, at a professional level, one of my Latino friends in school ended up investing in my fund. And that's, again, how much are you willing to give to Bentley? Because, this school provides you basically with everything that you need, for the rest of your life.
What a testament to the network. Thank you for saying that, Alejandro. In our research about diversity and inclusion, we often talk about how you can have a diverse group, but it is intimacy that really creates inclusion. Intimacy, the connection across differences, and really the ability to share your story and connect with people who are different from you. So what a powerful story about that. Vanessa, how about you coming into Bentley from Venezuela? How was it coming in, and how did your cultural identity inform your experience in school?
Yeah, so I came to Venezuela. I just have to say that I chose Bentley because my husband did his master's before me, so 2 years before me. So I already had like that contact. Like I met like a lot of like his friends. So it was kind of like homey for me. I liked it a lot, and I was pretty happy that when I started, like my master's degree was actually full of international people, so I was not a minority whatsoever. I was on the Latin side, we were a minority, but however, I just love being surrounded by international peers. I feel that there's so much that you can learn from them, like from different cultures, and that's something that I've always loved. Also, I feel that at Bentley, a huge what they really push you through is the networking phase, right? They told you have to networking, you have to start like joining organization, joining this group. So I actually ended up, we co-founded with some of my Latin friends, the Alpha chapter for graduate students. So the Alpha chapter like at Bentley, it's pretty strong, but there was no grad students chapter. So I don't think it's still I don't think it's still is there in Bentley. It still exists, but we did the grad chapter for Alpha, and that just opened a huge amount of like networking opportunity with the Boston Alpha chapter. So I remember like I went to the conference, I think it was in Washington DC with them, and then I started being like this whole network that actually it was career services that pushed me to join in one of these chapters. So that's also like a big recommendation that I have from any alumni or any student from the university. And yes, also like reach out to your peers. I mean, when I have a peer that reach out to me, it's like, hi, I'm international, I'm from Bentley. I'm like, say no more, I'm here to help. So, it's a very nice tight community that we form.
Mateo, and I know Guillermo just joined, but I think this is a great time just to tell you how I happened to meet Guillermo. I don't have, imagine what we were talking before, and for you panelists, imagine this story. One of my good friends from Guatemala, actually my neighbor, is currently working with Vanessa at Hubspot. So that shows how small the Bentley community and how intimate it is. And then
I just like her, and she says like, hi, how do you know him?
That's super cool. And then with Guillermo, Mateo, and Vanessa, this story is fantastic. I think Guillermo joined by phone or anything, but anyways, I think it was Bethany actually that introduced me and Guillermo, like a year ago or something like that Guillermo wanted to, start this startup and advice. And I'm like, hey, you're based in Miami and so on. And we ended up having a bunch of mutual connections, in the VC industry. And Guillermo was this past week in Brazil, and he sent me a picture, with a friend of mine from Guatemala that was in the same conference. So, as Vanessa was saying, part of the network, part of being open, but it's not only that, but following up afterwards, right, Mateo? It's actually putting that time to follow up afterwards. LinkedIn is an incredible search engine, to find people, mutual connections, and so on. But again, it's a two-way street, right? Like, how much time are you willing to put into building those, long-term relationships with people of your own community or you identify with in school?
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Alejandro. I'm so impressed by within 10 years what our students accomplished. So it's incredibly valuable to keep that network attached and to continue to reach out. So I believe Guillermo is on the phone. So let's try this. Guillermo, let's bring you in. And if you don't mind, just sharing with us a little bit about your cultural identity. And what we're talking about right now is about how that cultural identity developed through your time at Bentley. And then we'll shift to talking about workplace experiences.
Mateo, Alevanic, first of all, apologies for the connection. As a matter of fact, it's a very funny story. I'm banned from Zoom, and it has nothing to do with specifically me, but it's more with my line of work. So we tested this prior to today, and we had no problem connecting. I'm not sure why for the panel it's been so complicated, but we hacked it. I'm on the phone and it's working, and that's a big part of actually what, to me, being Hispanic or Latino in my case, has been. Like, we are used to just having to fix so many things on a daily basis that a big part of our cultural identity and how I define myself is just resourceful. I think that we are trained from a very early age to think on our feet and think on the go, have to develop some street smartness aside from, our academic career. And that plays a big role in who I am as a person. So I think that it has served me incredibly well, both in corporate America as in entrepreneurship and my journey that I'm going now, to have those skills, to be able to think on the go, to solve, to always try to, make the most with what you have. And I think that would be the biggest part of how my heritage has transformed me into the person I am. And talking about the network, Ali is correct. I met Ale through mutual friends, and we have became, near immediate friends now. And he's been a resource to me and to my startup throughout all this process. And this keeps happening. The more people that you know from the network, it's very easy to connect with someone when you're considered a minority elsewhere. So you automatically have this thing in common that makes you, sort of join a network quicker.
Really well said, Guillermo, and thank you. And we can hear you loud and clear on the phone and appreciate your resourcefulness for joining us. So let's talk about the three of your career path. You all do very interesting work. And so what is your work? What is your role? And what inspired you to pursue that particular path? And I know it's never linear, but in terms of where you're at right now, and let's actually go the other direction. Let's start with Vanessa, and then we'll go Guillermo and Alejandro. So Vanessa, tell us a little bit about your career journey.
Absolutely. So I did my master's in marketing analytics. Prior to that, my college degree in Venezuela was hospitality management. And I always thought I love hospitality. I love working in, the hotel industry, food industry. I love all that. Coming here to the US, as an immigrant, I'm just faced with this reality. Okay, I need a visa. I need a company sponsorship, the whole thing. So I have to leave on the side my hospitality job, right? And just focus on a career that's going to give me those opportunities. So that's why I actually decided to go towards marketing analytics. And when I ended marketing analytics, I kind of wanted to do something I still really enjoy. And I discovered digital marketing, which was kind of a combination. It's kind of on the same side. And I actually started and I worked for 5 years in a very small agency, digital marketing agency in Waltham. So I kind of stayed in the Waltham area. And it's funny because I was the only non-American person. Actually, no, we were two. So it was not diverse at all. So I still learn a lot and totally enjoy my time there. But that really led me to the position where I'm now in the company that I love. So I'm working at Hubspot. Not only at Hubspot, but on the international team. And I'm very proud of it because to be part of the international team, they have some prerequisites. And one of them is speaking at least 2 languages. So I felt that I had all this advantage, but it wasn't being used. So here I found a position, a company that really value what I have as an asset and wasn't seen as, oh, you have an accent when you talk in English. So here, when you work at HubSpot, basically there's so many accents from all over the world and people are so open to them. It's it's the normal day to day. So it's something I really enjoy. So what I do is I manage the international website. So we have 5 websites. I have French, Spanish, German, Japanese, and Portuguese. So I do get to interact with all of those regional teams. So I talk with the French team, with the German team, Japanese is very different as well. And of course, the Latin team. So it's a great experience. I love being on the international side of the job. It's really different.
That's so great. And based on your life experiences, what an incredible alignment with your experiences and your skills in the role. Thank you.
Exactly.
Guillermo, how about you? Tell us a little bit about what you do and how you arrived at your particular career path.
Well, I think that as with most of the Hispanic immigrants in the U.S., my path was defined actually a lot to do with the immigration process. So I left Bentley after graduating to without having the ability to actually get somebody that wanted to sponsor my H-1B visa, which is the process in which you can legally stay in the U.S. after your OPT, your optional practical training, it's done, which is an extension of your student visa. So it was very important for me to be able to stay here, and I needed somebody to sponsor that process because you can't do it yourself. So a family member owned a business in Miami and basically said, hey, I'll sponsor you, come work with us and take over this family business. And I did so for 3 years. that business was in distribution of electronics and logistics. So we exported electronics to mainly the Caribbean and South America. I stayed there 3 years. It wasn't my passion at all, but hey, they were giving me my visa, which was a trade-off. And as soon as I got that document, I was able to sort of get released from that and start seeking what truly was my interest, which was the wealth management side of banking. So I joined a local bank in Miami, stayed there for 6.5 years, developed a private banking book, ended up growing it to over $100 million over that time, and became the banker for Venezuela, Argentina, and Brazil, because I also happen to speak Portuguese. And ultimately, through that process, a lot of my personal hobby in crypto started to interact with the banking world as well. And just last year, I decided to close my banking chapter and start a crypto compliance platform where we use machine learning tools to basically analyze different Bitcoin and different cryptocurrency networks for risk, and we sell that risk information and then decryption information to the government, to banks, and to law enforcement.
Wow, incredible, Guillermo. And I love that story. Our students can take so much from that. Thank you. Alejandro, how about you?
Welcome.
Your current career path.
It's pretty cool. Guillermo startup is at some point is going to be part of my portfolio and my fund. I promise that, all right, Guy? Not sure when or how, but we'll make it happen.
Yeah, we're gonna make it happen, Ale.
No, I'm not gonna tell a story, Mateo, of what I'm currently doing. You know, I have just context. I run a venture capital fund here in Guatemala. But a lot of, you know, what Vanessa was saying about the accent, you know. So I was due to graduate in December 2016 from Bentley, right? And you know, as Guillermo was saying, and similar to Guillermo, you know, the majority of Bentley students, you know, they want to, you know, pursue careers in marketing, finance, investment banking, you name it, right? So there was this conference, you know, the New England Revolution, the MLS soccer team out of Foxborough, same owners as the Patriots, they gave a conference, you know, and they were seeking for account executives, literally, you know, picking up the phone and selling tickets. And I'm like, all right, you know, I know about soccer, you know, and this is something, and, you know, what Guillermo was saying in terms of the visa, I might only have 1 year with my OPT, and we'll see if they're going to sponsor my visa or not, you know, but might as well do something that, you know, I feel familiar, and then I'll go back to Guatemala and figure it out. So imagine, Mateo, me entering my interview with the reps with this accent, you know, I was the only non-American in terms, you know, like the management team, just like everyone. And I remember that first interview, you know, the vice president of sales, his name was James Mullins. He started laughing and he's like, do you know something? And I'm like, what? Look at the picture that I have here. James previously worked in the LA Galaxy, another team, you know, in California, right? You know, like it's soccer, it's a big thing in California, based with all the immigrants and so on. And he had a picture with this Guatemalan professional soccer player, or Carlos Ruiz, you know, that played for the LA Galaxy, where David Beckham was playing and so on. I'm like, oh, geez, you know, so we immediately click, and he asked me like, how good are you on the phone? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you know, do you feel comfortable speaking to people? And I'm like, yeah, 100%. The only issue that I have is like, based on my accent, what Vanessa was saying, I'm not sure, like, you know, they will understand what I'm saying, you know? So he's like, all right, let's do something, you know, here's like the database of all the Latinos that attend our games, right? I also spoke Italian on all the Italian community. The Italian community is pretty big in Boston. So they gave me those lists, you know, like in terms of Latinos and Italians. And 2 months in, Mateo, I was the salesperson with more revenue, generating more revenue in the reps, you know, because with the Latinos, you know, I wasn't afraid to pick up the phone and speak to them in Spanish. And their feedback was like, hey, you know, you're the first account executive that's giving me a call in Spanish. And, you know, I would talk soccer about it, and I would spend, you know, I don't know, 35 minutes on a call in only to sell like a 2-ticket package, which was nothing. But like, you know, my closing rate was pretty high because, you know, I identify a niche. And then, you know, Juventus, an Italian professional soccer team, and AS Roma came to Boston, to Foxborough during summer to play. And they literally sent me out to Little Italy, you know, like near Welcome, you know, near the city, all the Italian community, you know, and I was speaking to them in Italian. I'm like, yeah, I'll give you no fuel passes and so on, and ended up generating that type of stuff, you know. So like with Vanessa, I was saying, you know, like sometimes my accent, you know, people were like, hey, you know, I love the passion and everything, but like I don't understand what you're selling, you know, if it's a 8-game pack or 6-game pack or something like that. And I'm like, oh, like, let's do something, you know, I'm gonna transfer to someone, you know, that has a similar accent to you. And, you know, guys, just send me all the Latinos my way and I'll be closing. But that's the story that, you know, I think summarizes a bunch of this seminar, right?
I love that. I love that story. What a great story. You're killing it out there. And to this point, I mean, part of what you're saying to me, Alejandro, that's so powerful is that it is very powerful to be seen and heard as we are. And so your ability to communicate with, you know, the Latino community and be able to speak the language and really understand the culture makes such a difference in relationship building, whether it's at work or in our personal lives. Both you and Vanessa had mentioned in your stories about being in places where you're the only one. So only non-American, potentially only Latino person with an accent, person of color. And Guillermo, I don't know what your experience is like, but let's just talk briefly about any barriers or challenges that have come with that. Some of you have already touched on them. What was it like for you in those situations? What specifically about your Latino, Latinx, Latina identities presented challenges? And then what resources did you use and leverage in your strengths to overcome those challenges? So I don't want to confuse the panel, but why don't we go back to Alejandro and then we'll go to Guillermo and Vanessa next.
That's a good question. And I'm gonna open myself up here, you know, with one experience that did happen to me at the reps, you know. At first, you know, a bunch of the, you know, senior account executives, Mateo, I don't want to say that they were laughing, you know, but I could definitely feel in the environment, you know, that they were like, Jesus Christ, you know, like this guy from Guatemala selling tickets in Boston, like soccer, you know, like in Boston, we have the Red Sox, the Patriots, like, Jesus, like selling soccer tickets in Boston, trust me, it's not the easiest thing. And I can definitely sense, you know, that vibe of them, like not laughing, you know, but just saying like, this guy is gonna last the most 2 weeks or the most 3 weeks, you know. And I remember, you know, like super stories of a couple of them just going out for lunch and not saying like, hey, do you want to join or anything of the sort, you know. I don't think it would have anything to do with racism or anything of that sort. I just feel, you know, like they were like, hey, if you're selling tickets over the phone and your accent is definitely a barrier, you know, like you're gonna last your 2 weeks. But afterwards, you know, when they started listening to the conversation and I started putting, you know, the revenue in and that type of stuff, you know, like somehow they started respecting that, you know. I'm a super open person, you know, like I can speak with the wall next to me, you know, that's not an issue for me. But at some point, and I remember calling my dad and I'm like, listen, I feel this vibe, you know, the first 5, 6, 7 days of work, you know, of like people even like talking among themselves, you know, that they ended up being my friends. You know, I'm actually going to one of them's wedding next month. But at some point I did feel that uncomfortable feeling, Mateo. Not sure if it happened to Vanessa, you know, but like people talk and people speak, you know, and it was quite, you know, like I wasn't used to that. It was my first professional work experience. So my incentive to the panelists here or something like, you know, if you know, if you're here, I don't want to say like big time, but you know, don't be scared or don't feel less because, you know, they're talking about, you know, your background, your accent, what school you're coming from, and so on. At the end, guys, it's about proving yourself, you know. I love this quote that it says like the loudest boos come from the cheapest seats, you know, and with that, I'm not saying, you know, like make enemies at work or anything of the sort, you know, but use this as a motivation. At an emotional level, it was definitely those 5, 6, 7 days, Mateo, the first days were like, all right, maybe, you know, I'm gonna go to my finance career and find someone else, you know, that I can, you know, have lunch with or something like that. Anyways, but that's just a quick story on that.
It's an excellent story, and I'll just take a very brief moment because accent is such a huge part of our identity that there's research that people can understand the accent. It's their anxiety that gets in the way. And so oftentimes I remind people who have accents, who might not be American, that if you're receiving that kind of feedback, it's their anxiety, right? Like you know what you're doing, you know why you're there, and being able to kind of not internalize that, like that there's something wrong with you, but rather it's their inability to kind of manage the anxiety around the difference. Thank you for sharing that. Guillermo, how about you? Have you experienced any barriers or challenges related to your identity? And if so, how did you overcome those?
I completely relate to Ale's story, because my first real work experience was actually at a very large banking institution in the US in New York. And I was doing investment banking, which is notably, it's notably considered to be a very bro fraternity / Abercrombie and Fitch environment. And that's, it's stereotypically considered that way, but it's actually somewhat true. So fitting as a minority in that program, and I actually came in through a minority hire program from that bank. It was the first week and a half was a lot of having to prove myself, having to explain myself more than once, which actually contributed to me feeling that I wasn't in the right place. You know, as you prove yourself and work hard to show everybody else around that not only are you capable, but that you can also add different type of value because of the diversity, because of the train of thought, because of the things and experiences that you have had, you know, coming from elsewhere and your point of view, that actually became an asset. And it became an asset to the point where I got invited to actually come in full time to that bank. But they wouldn't do my visa. And that was really what made the decision for me of not pursuing that option. In my second work experience, which was, you know, with a family company, obviously that dealt more on the Hispanic, South American, Latin play. So there wasn't really that much of a difference in terms of cultural identity for the company. And in the bank, it's a Cuban / Venezuelan bank. So I basically narrated all my story more on the Hispanic side. Now, as an entrepreneur, things do work a bit different, because as an entrepreneur, you're pitching to funds anywhere, and the receptivity from funds in the US for Latin plays now is significantly higher. So somewhat, this is the other side of the coin from when I was at Citi. In Citi, I felt that I had to prove myself constantly, and I had to show them why we could add value. In venture, it's the exact opposite. Funds already know that because you are playing in the Latin space, because you're a Latino entrepreneur, you are used to dealing with all these things, and they really want to hear you out and want to hear how you're doing it. So in that sense, I think that it's been really interesting for me to see the progression over the last 10 years of how our identity as Hispanics and in general, how the Latino and Latinx culture have really grown in the United States. I think that, you know, having Bad Bunny speak Spanish, he doesn't speak English really, sing in Spanish and still be the most famous singer in the world, is telling you something. Like, or our culture is truly making gaining market share, if I may say, in this country now.
Absolutely. I listened to Bad Bunny on my way driving over here and was thinking the same thing. And I wrote myself a message that, you know, Latinos are the future of leadership in this country, I believe, for all the reasons that you all have mentioned. Vanessa, for you, in terms of your cultural heritage and also being a woman, having this intersectional identity, what have your experiences been like, and where have you drawn support and resources from?
Yes. So talking also about my, being like this very minority in this very American company, I remember at the beginning, we would like all have lunch together because we're like 25 employees. So it was like a small group of young people, and I couldn't understand. I couldn't follow the conversation. And I consider my English was pretty good, but it was not like street English. So it was pretty hard for me just like to make those relationships. And I was just like trying to follow. So it was a little bit isolating. kind of like gravitate towards like other people, but also I kind of wanted to be able to, you know, be integrated in that culture. So I just like started, and I didn't miss a launch. I just was trying to get the slang, trying to get everything until I was like also learning their culture. So it's also like, you don't expect everybody to want to learn your culture. You also need to participate actively and just like try to integrate yourself. What I did draw like some supports. I mean, I just leave it at, you know, this is work. I'm trying to get this relationship. I'm trying to make it work on the social parts. Outside of work, basically my whole base, it's like Venezuelan. I had like some friends from Bentley that were like Portuguese. I mean, from Brazil, they speak Portuguese. So I had like other social groups, but mostly is, just like a Venezuelan social like support group. And it's funny because those like my best friends, like couple best friends here at Boston, they are actually from Bentley. They were introduced to us by career services. So, you know, hey, let's network so we can start, and now our kids are our friends. So, yeah, I also was at that moment very into, you know, getting like the network still going. So I was still joining like alpha networking group where people like were Latino, they didn't necessarily speak Spanish, but, you know, there was like at least this sentiment of belonging. You know, you belong to a group, a networking organization. So that helped me a lot. And yeah. And I did have like some, it's not microaggression, just like a all fun thing, not so much for you, you know, just like, oh, we're gonna like mispronunciation where you're just like, wow, okay, I'm gonna pass. But, you know, at the end, it's like, they're still like well-natured. So I think we all had that, even though like I don't feel like I had like huge barriers. About the woman part, like I haven't felt that, just because like in marketing, it's a very woman environment. In the position where I'm now in the company where I mean, we have like female leadership. Our CEO is a female, so there's not a lot of like issues on that end.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Vanessa. And I would call mispronouncing your name a microaggression. Once people are told, right, they can learn how to pronounce hard names for them.
Well, my husband has it worse. His name is Cesar. He's from Caesar, like the Caesar salad, Cesars, and all kind of like pronunciation.
Right. What do we always say? If people can pronounce Tchaikovsky, they can pronounce Cesar. So as we're kind of turning the corner towards the end, all three of you talked about sources of support, including your families, people back home, people in your Bentley network, various people in your communities, and the ways that you all have leveraged your strengths to kind of open up doors for other people. So this is kind of a two-part question for the end, and we'll go in the order of Guillermo, Vanessa, and Alejandro, but it's both like, how do you use your experiences to open doors for other Latino and Latina people behind you? And how can the community who's on this call and the community of Bentley, who maybe are not part of that identity group, support us in our journeys? So both, how do you use your strengths to open doors, and what can other people do to continue supporting this community? So Guillermo, are you comfortable starting us off with this last question?
Yeah, of course. So the first thing I would say there is that honestly, when I'm gonna support someone or help someone, I really never look at gender, race, religion. Like I just look at a person, right? So I don't really care if you come to me and ask me for help because you're Latino or because you are American, or like I'm from the mentality of give first, and I think that Ale is going to probably speak to the same because we both connected through that mentality. We were born and raised with a gift first approach, and sometimes you help somebody today and maybe 5 years, 10 years down the road they are in a position where they can really help you. So I don't think that, I don't know if it has to do with like a cultural thing, but I think that in Latam, being give first has truly been a mantra for the last decade. in entrepreneurship in corporate Latam as well. And I live like that. I think that a lot of the things that we can just do is, instead of doing transactional approaches to relationship where I'm going to help you and I want something in return, we should just, help each other with the mentality of, I want to help you because I want to, make a better planet. I want to help you because I can. Sometimes, you might help somebody just because you're in a position to do it and not want something in return. If at some point they can give back to you, awesome. But if they can't, hey, just feel good about the fact that you helped somebody else.
Beautifully said, Guillermo. Thank you. The give first approach. I really like that. Vanessa, how about you? What do you do to open doors for others behind you, and how can we continue to support the community as people, for the people who are non-Latino on the call?
Absolutely. So what I've been doing, like where I can support is like anyone who contact me from Bentley. Just the fact that this networking thing, right? So keep on networking, and anyone that comes to me through Bentley is like, hey, I'm a Bentley alumni. I'm like, okay, let's talk. I'm always very open to giving that helping hand, Latino, not Latino, and then with career services that have connected me with a ton of people. And I feel like some of those relationships, and even though I cannot help them because sometimes they're out of my control, I can just give words of support, or just make you feel like you're not alone, and then give my experiences and what worked for me, which will not work for everyone. One good advice that I have, it was good for me at least, and I know it's not possible for everyone. It's hard to find a company that you really like, but for me, finding this international company was a huge eye opener, because that's where you start seeing that you have a tons of assets, strengths that maybe in a company that is not multicultural, they're not going to be taken into account. Oh yeah, you speak Spanish, great. You speak this, great. But do you speak a good English? Do you speak this? But here it was a total asset. And I think I already mentioned this, but the fact that the international team, they really are looking for people that have multicultural experience, right? They just don't want someone from just one background. No, just have an open-minded. It gives you having that open-mindedness, that helping hand, and that's and what I think Bentley, by doing this event, it's a great way, because you do connect people, and as they say, it's all about networking and giving this helping hand and helping us, helping each other.
Yeah, well said, Vanessa. And even for the companies that may not have an international arm, doing the DEI work, the inclusion work, to make sure that we're being able to leverage your strengths that you bring from your life experiences.
Yeah, that's very important. And I remember that in my small company agency, we did not have that DNB whatsoever. And here, it's a huge thing. And even each little group, my team, we are each in charge a monthly DNB topic. So it's something that's very present all the time. So yeah.
That's wonderful. So shout out to HubSpot again for creating that culture. Alejandro, how about you, Alejandro? I know you do a lot of work to open doors behind you. What is that work? And also, how can people who are not from the community continue offering support?
So I would just say, and recall what Vanessa just mentioned, any Bentley student, alumni, or related to the school that want to reach out, for advice, a quick call or everything, I'm always open, 100%. And then, in terms of my current work, Mateo, it's similar to what happened with Guillermo and myself, how we got introduced, me working in the venture capital industry, very interested, in going back, if you're an alumni living in the US or Europe or something like that, and you want to go back to your place of birth, let's say Latin America, you name it, Venezuela, Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Uruguay, Argentina, or whatever, and you're interested in pursuing a career over there, in finance or anything like that, I've made, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 interns, from Bentley graduates, people that are about to graduate from the school, to other venture capital funds, to startups and so on, and that's my way of giving back to the school, since I was obviously graduated from Bentley, I know, how it feels. I know, like how prepared well they are and so on. So, I have full confidence and trust of making those commercial interests, if you want to see it that way.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, all three of you. We are 1 minute to time. I see Abby setting up to close us down, but I learned a lot from the three of you and just appreciate your generosity. Just very briefly, there's an article that I love. It's an academic article where they interview 20 Latina women who are successful in their careers, and they do these really intensive interviews and analyze all of the data. And what they boil it down to for the women who are successful, the Latina women, they say it was two things. One, it was always choosing yourself, your own authenticity over something that might feel prestigious, something that might be, about the money or about other people's expectations, people who stay true to themselves. And the second most important factor in these women's success was giving back to others. And so it's apparent and no coincidence that the three of you on this call are successful in everything you do because of the way that you show up for your community and for Bentley. So we're incredibly grateful. Thank you, Abby and Bethany and the annual giving group for putting this together. Abby, I'll turn it over to you for last remarks. Thank you, everyone. We can't see you on the webinar, but I can see the participant numbers in the clicker, and whoever you are out there, thank you. Please do reach out to us. You can find me also on LinkedIn if you have any follow-up questions as well about Bentley and the work that we're currently doing.
Thank you so much, Mateo. I just wanted to give another thank you to all of our panelists for sharing such incredible stories and really helpful advice to our audience. And I'm so grateful and happy that we were able to get Guillermo on and really troubleshoot that so he was able to join us today. And I wanted to thank Mateo specifically for really moderating this and leading such an inspiring conversation. And lastly, I want to thank our audience members for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the program as much as I did, and I wish you all a wonderful week. Thank you so much.